one of the most common questions I get when it comes to sketching is how do you sketch cars in perspective? And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. So in the previous videos we talked a little bit about sketching cars in side views, such as this one. This is the Polestar 1, and then we have a couple of Ferraris and some sort of old style Jeep here, and I talk about how to sketch these type of sketches in my previous video. So if you're interested in that, you might want to go and check that out. But today we're going to talk about all about perspective. So how do we get perspective sketches when it comes to not just cars, but in pretty much any product you want to sketch in perspective? And the thing is, there is certain by the book ways which you can sketch in perspective. For example, you can set up a big grid system, spend 15-20 minutes before you go into the actual sketching. But for me, I just don't have the patience to do that. So what I want to show you today, it's part of the cloud sketching technique, but it's not really cloud sketching, because today we're gonna just work with ellipses, and I'm gonna show you how to sketch cars in perspective using just an ellipse. That's what we're gonna start with. So first of all, let's make a sketch. Let's say we want to sketch in a 3/4 rear view here. What I like to do is just to put out an ellipse like this, very simply. So the thing is right here is that we want to look at these ellipses, and these are going to be the outline of our entire sketch. So from here we need to decide how much angle do we want in the sketch. Do we want it to be a full almost front view, or do we want to have more of a visual side view? I like to have it somewhere in the middle. So how we determine that is we put out the ellipses for the wheels. We can put out one wheel arch right there, and then we can put out the next one maybe somewhere around here. And as you can see, I'm making this a little bigger than this one. The reason being, this is farther away from the camera, and I want to have some perspective in there, some depth in the sketch. So from here, right now already, you can kind of start to see where this is going, right? We started with an ellipse, and that ellipse is going to help guide everything else in this sketch. So from here, if we want to create a rear view, I want to create the hood, for example, and make a very few lines. So let's try to keep this, I want to try to keep this as simple as possible for you guys so you can implement this yourself. I like to just sketch one line going something like this, first up a little bit from the end point of the wheel arch, and then just straight back, and then we can have the greenhouse maybe starting in the middle in between the front and rear axle right here. So we can have the greenhouse starting maybe somewhere around this point, and then we want to dip this greenhouse quickly if we want to have a sports car, which I'm going to do right here. We want to have a dip somewhere like this, and then just mark out the end point of the car, maybe have it somewhere right there. That means that we're gonna have to dip this a little further or steeper. This is another thing I want to touch on, is you can always adjust your sketch as you go. You don't have to be perfect with the first couple of lines that you put out. Just put out some lines, and then you can see what's working and what's not, and you can just adjust the lines as you go along in the sketch. And then we can create the greenhouse here as well, maybe have it dip something like this, go a little bit further than the rear wheel arch, and have the greenhouse then continue into the first line we created. And just looking at this right now, we have a pretty clear idea of where the rest of the parts of this car, where they go. So I want to have a center line right here. Let's create a end point of the end of the car, something like this. It doesn't really matter at the moment. We're gonna stylize it in a later point. So right now we're just thinking of getting the proportions right and kind of the feel for this design by putting out the big graphic features where they're supposed to be in this car. And we can also put out the rear window here, for example, to add some more details that kind of guides the eye towards where everything is. And from here we pretty much have the rear view done. All that's left to do now is the fun part, which is the styling of this car. So from here we have the proportions pretty much correct. The thing is, I'm not looking to do an illustration. I'm doing sketches here, and there's a big difference between illustrations and sketches. An illustration is supposed to be almost a photographic interpretation of what it is you're sketching, but I'm not interested in that. I just want to put some lines and sketches down, and that means that the perspective is not going to be 100%, but it doesn't matter because that's not the point of a sketch. Now it is different if you want to learn illustration, but then I'm not the one to teach you that, because that's not what I do myself, or that's not what I enjoy enjoy doing myself. I like to do very dirty sketches, and this is also, in my opinion, the best way and the quickest way to learn how to get this right, is to just put out a bunch of different sketches like this, and then as you go along, you're gonna notice and you're gonna see what is actually wrong with the sketch and what you can do better for next time. You just want to put the lines down and continue from that point. So what I want to do now is obviously add a baseline for this car, so we need to have some sort of endpoint in the bottom, and that's going to connect with this line that we have in the rear end. And from here we can add some, for example, some exhaust if you want to do that. This is a very generic looking car, but that's the point of this video. Don't want to overstyle and make it too complicated. I want to show you the idea or the philosophy behind this way of using an ellipse. So let me show you real quick. If you want to have different views and still using an ellipse, we can have one ellipse that's pretty narrow like this, maybe one that's a little thicker like this, and then we can put out the wheel arches again, maybe have them wider now because we're gonna have this more in a side view. Maybe we can make this into a front view, so we have the rear wheel arch. The wheel arches, in my opinion, are the ones you want to start putting out first, because it just makes sense to have those out in sketched out before you start to sketch anything else on the car. And from here we can see that we have pretty much the proportions of this car done, and the key lines are in the sketch just from this point, from a very early point, and that's exactly what we want. We don't want to spend too much time, at least I don't, setting up a grid system for the car. And as you can see, I'm moving the front axle a little bit further back because I'm adjusting as I'm sketching. I know that the first lines that I put out are not going to be the ones that's going to stick, so I have to kind of gauge where the lines are going and then take a minute to look if everything looks pretty decent, and then before I continue to go in on the final details of a sketch like this. And that, I think this is a good approach to, specifically if you're starting to sketch. Once you get used to it, I definitely prefer to just wing it and sketch like this. It's a faster way and it's a quicker way to get sketches done, and you don't really care about perfection at this point. That's not what we're about here. We're just about sketching and having fun and get some sketches done. So there we have it, guys. That's how you can easily sketch things in perspective. I want to make a video where I talk about more about the cloud sketching technique and how you can use that to sketch different types of products. But this is just a very, very basic way that I like to sketch cars in perspective. Start with a big ellipse. Don't worry about it getting perfect. So the purpose of these videos is to just get you to sketch more. If you want to dive deeper into this, make sure you download my free ebook 10 Essentials for Every Designer. If you haven't already, it's linked down in the description, or go to thesketchacademy.com. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.